So moving on, we'll be first of all discussing the organization and the localization of the brain. So we went through the fact that the brain is located in the cranial cavity. And there are certain factors that we are even going to discuss over here. For the purpose of study, it is basically divided into two cortices. We have two cerebral cortices out there. That is also known as the cerebral hemispheres. We have a right, and then as you can even evaluate over here, we have a left cerebral hemisphere. And again, it is we have different dominant hemispheres in different individuals that we're going to discuss. What is the functionality of that, and what are the different structures that we're going to discuss more over, the sulci, the gyri that are present out there, and then the anatomical or the functional localization of the different centers, the higher brain centers that are being located in our cerebral hemispheres out there. The integration and the coordination that we talk again and again about, that comes about due to the neuronal organization in our cerebral hemispheres. So the functionality and the organization, the architecture is very important to discuss over here. And that is obviously, we'll be discussing the cerebral hemispheres in detail. So the brain is connected to the spinal cord through this brain stem that is present. So this is a very important connection between the cerebral hemispheres and then the spinal cord. It's again very interesting to note down different nuclei that come out. We mentioned that there are the cranial nerves that are coming directly out of the brain or the brain stem. So the localizations of these nuclei, we'd be discussing that the brain stem is a conduit that is present, and it is basically coming out of the foramen magnum, and it is uniting the cerebral hemispheres with the spinal cord. So it's very interesting to get to know the details of the brain stem and what are the different structures that are located inside the brain stem, and that is basically the term collectively is known as the brain stem. So again, it is basically a conduit, it's basically a pathway. And again, it's very important to clinically imply our knowledge regarding the brain stem, regarding the cerebral hemispheres towards the clinical, when we are conducting the outpatient departments, you should be well versed with all of these anatomical structures. Again, when we are basically going through the details of the brain or any of the structure in our nervous system, we can review the structure in different sections. And we can have an axial section of any organ. As you can see, it's basically a cross section that we are terming as an axial section. And again, important structures reveal out there when we have an axial section. And sometimes it's impossible to review different structures in an axial section. So we revert to another way. It's basically a longitudinal section, which is known as the coronal section out here. So either way, we are basically trying to look at different structures that are present in our cerebral cortex, and sometimes the structure is not visible on the axial section, so we review to the coronal section and vice versa. So it's depending upon which structure we want to review in that individual. And then we have a sagittal section. It's again a longitudinal section, but the diagonality is quite different. If you want to have a detailed overview regarding the different sections, you can watch a detailed lecture regarding the anatomical positioning and the terms that are used for the anatomical positioning, and then you can review and go through the details out there. The brain is a very important structure and is needed for the coordination and the integration. So there has to be a protective covering that is being provided. And we don't have a single protective covering. Nature has provided almost 3 protective coverings to the brain and as well as the spinal cord. So if you look at it, namely we have the dura mater, and then moving inwards we have the arachnoid, and then we have the biomatter. These are the meningeal layerings that are providing the protection to the brain as well as the brain stem, the spinal cord. So they're present all in all in our central nervous system, and they're providing a protective covering. Again, there are all so different functions that are being performed by the arachnoid matter, the arachnoid granulations. It is again important in the CSF production, so it has its own functionality as well. They are basically performing, but the basic function that they have is the protection that they are providing to the brain and its structures. Now, there is something very interesting that you have to remember, that the organization of the gray and the white matter inside the cerebral cortices. So you would have a look at over here that the outer covering is the gray matter and the inner covering is the white matter. So the cell bodies are usually present in the gray matter, and the white matter are usually containing the axonal transports materials that are present over here, the axons of the neurons that are present over here, the dendrites, they can be present, but the cell bodies, they remain in the gray matter. Even the important nuclei that are present inside the white matter. The nuclei is basically a word or a terminology that is indicating the islands of the gray matter that are present inside the white matter. For instance, it's not only that the gray matter or the cellular bodies are only present on the outer side. We have a lot of nuclei that are present out here in the white matter. So these are the islands of the gray matter that are present out here, and then they are named as the nuclei. So there are different nuclei that are present at different sections. We'd be going through the details of that. And again, they have their different functions to perform, and we'd be even going through the details of those functions. What is the basic purpose of that particular nuclei that is present at a different section out there. Now, the different parts of the brain that we are going to consider, the forebrain is basically consisting of the cerebrum, and then we have the midbrain, and then we have the hindbrain, which is basically consisting of the cerebellum. So we have the forebrain, then we have the midbrain, and the midbrain is basically a collection of different small structures that is present. For instance, the mammillary body that is present, the glands that are present out there, and sometimes it's very difficult to just locate the exact location when we are looking at a coronal section or when we are looking at a sagittal section, but it is somewhat around here. And then we have the cerebellum that is present, and cerebellum, the basic function is to perform the coordination, the balance in an individual when we are performing different coordinated movements at the same time. So these are the different functions that the different parts for the purpose of study. Obviously, we are dividing the brain into forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. Now, the forebrain is basically subdivided into telencephalon, and then we have diencephalon. Midbrain, the terminology of mesencephalon is used for the midbrain. And then we have hindbrain, where the terminologies of metencephalon and myelencephalon, different structures are basically a part of this metencephalon and myelencephalon. We'll be going through that. So as you can see, as we mentioned, we have a hindbrain. Then the hindbrain has these two, metencephalon and we have myelencephalon. Metencephalon basically comprises of the cerebellum and the pons. On the other hand, the myelencephalon has the medulla oblongata. So the structures of the brainstem are being located over here in the hindbrain. They are a part of a hindbrain, and namely the terminologies used for these metencephalon and the myelencephalon are being used for these important structures out there. So whenever I'll be using these terminologies, you should be well versed with what I actually mean with by saying metencephalon or by saying myelencephalon. So these terminologies should be very clear over here. What structures are basically meant when we are referring to these different parts of the hindbrain. Then we have the midbrain, and then finally we have the forebrain, which is again further subdivided into telencephalon, which is referring to the cerebral cortices, the two cerebral cortices, right and left cerebral hemispheres. And on the other hand, we have diencephalon, which is basically consisting of the thalamus and is consisting of the hypothalamus out there. So thalamus and hypothalamus, you can just remember right now that they are the relay stations. A lot of emotions are being attached to the existence of the thalamus and hypothalamus. So collectively, they are making or collectively they are constituting the diencephalon out there. Then we have the brainstem, and it is a collective term whenever we use, for instance, in any kind of a mechanical injury, when we refer that the brainstem is being injured, we are referring to the fact, or we are collectively using a term for the medulla oblongata, for the pons, and for the midbrain. So this collective conduit of the collective pathway, this collective conduit pathway, which is consisting of medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain. All of these are collectively termed as the brainstem. So this is one way to look at the things. So these terminologies you should be very clear with, and these are the usual terms that we refer to even clinically and even when we are theoretically looking at different parts of the brain. We usually go through them like this, and we should be well versed with the fact that how the brain is divided furthermore. And even for the purpose of functionality, it's very important, because all of these structures, they perform their different functions in a particular way. So again, just to emphasize on the fact, what we have already till now, what we have gone through, we went through the fact that there are these cerebral hemispheres, and then we have the corpus callosum. We just mentioned that there are two cerebral hemispheres. So there has to be a conduit in between them as well. So there are the intercommissural fibers that are present at the corpus callosum. And they're basically transferring the messages from one hemisphere to the other. So this is again a very important connection to be maintained. Then we have the thalamus that is located over here. It's almost inferiorly present to the corpus callosum. We have the hypothalamus that is present inferiorly to the thalamus. And then finally, we have the midbrain structures that are present inferior to the hypothalamus right over here. Moving on, we have the pons. So we said there is a midbrain, this is the pons, and then we have the medulla oblongata somewhat over here, and is basically compromising of the fact that we collectively use the terms brainstem for the midbrain pons and the medulla oblongata. And then we have the cerebellum, which is basically an organ for the coordination and balance that is present out there. So these are the important structures when we look at the sagittal section of the brain, and these important structures, they appear. This is a very common image that you would be going through again and again when we are dealing with the neuroanatomy. So you should be knowing what are the different relations superiorly, inferiorly, laterally, and medially to the different structures. And this is the basic knowledge that you should have before we start off with the extensive neuroanatomy that we're going to study.